With Marvel vs. Capcom's staggering rosters comes an undeniable legacy of busted top tiers, as no matter which game in the series is your favourite, there will be characters who can easily run circles around their competition, dominating competitive play without breaking a sweat. With that said, I wanted to investigate the other side of the coin and explore the tier list's bottom feeders, the ones doomed to live off the grid and far away from polite society. After spending more time than I'd like to admit researching 90s fighting games, I've decided to cover the franchise's worst characters, beginning with Children of the Atom and ending with Marvel Infinite. As always, discussions surrounding fighting game character viability feature both objective data and subjective opinion, with there being plenty of room for discussion and disagreement. As characters in Marvel form together in teams to cover their weaknesses, it can make looking at individual culprits in a vacuum somewhat of a tricky goal. But in order to ensure accuracy, I've travelled on over to the Super Combo Wiki website and gazed upon its many Marvel tier lists. It's important to note that when I say worst character, I'm not saying they aren't fun or that they're a wasted character slot, just that they're low tier. Okay, now that you know the drill, prepare to be gobsmacked as we explore Marvel vs. Capcom's worst fighters. Children of the Atom. Although it's one of my favourite Marvel vs. Capcom entries, the game's age and a lack of modern day popularity makes it tricky to determine who the worst fighter is. But after skimming through a tier list discussion video where 15 people all talk over each other at once on Discord, I've come to the conclusion that Silver Samurai fits the bill nicely. In stark contrast to those who love to rush the enemy down with infinite combos, Silver Samurai's game plan is more methodical, focusing almost solely on poking and chip damage. Additionally, he has a good amount of health, simple execution, and the ability to become invincible, so he's not actually too bad if you're just starting out. With that said, his weaknesses become obvious when you fight experienced opponents, and some of them truly baffle me on a spiritual level. Children of the Atom is one of those fighting games where character fall speed is impacted by their weight class, with Silver Samurai being the perfect height and weight for all sorts of shenanigans. Any combo, reset, or infinite you could imagine will most likely work against him, meaning that there's no get out of jail free card if he's attacked at a weird angle. Escaping these positions in the first place is another battle entirely, as his movement speed leaves much to be desired. Throws are another major drawback, as no matter how you input them, Silver Samurai will always switch sides, as well as having little combo potential here. His elongated recovery animation doesn't leave him much time to run up an OTG either. On the topic of combos, Medium Punch is a multi-hit launcher. This sounds pretty good until you realize that the first hit has to connect before the launcher itself kicks in, and even when you're right up close, larger characters can shrug it off. Sentinel, for example, will recover from hit stun after the first hit, making it easy to block and punish the follow-up. On a much cooler note, Silver Samurai can enter multiple installs that alter basic attack properties and supers, with my favourite being the Ice Transformation. Upon contact, enemies will become frozen in place, leading to otherwise impossible combo routes. These installs run on a timer and can only be changed when it expires, but with all this startup, enemies can easily strike you out of the animation. If this happens, you aren't granted the elemental change, so you'll need to try again. Harnessing elemental-based installs is a really unique mechanic, but as all three of them cost meter, it leads to damaging combo routes requiring resources. Many other fighters can simply just do big damage without needing to think about meter usage, install timers, etc., whereas Silver Samurai is forced to deal with these mechanics. This next weakness, however, is the one that easily confused me the most. I nearly spat out my drink when I realized it. For reasons unbeknownst to humanity, Silver Samurai has no lows. And I don't mean to say that he has no good lows, I mean it literally. Silver Samurai cannot attack the opponent with lows. All of his crouching buttons hit either mid or high, including his sweep, even though it looks like it should be striking their legs. Projectiles that are angled downwards still hit mid too, so I'm convinced that he actually just can't swipe at their legs. In a game with all sorts of wacky infinites and short yet high damage combos, Silver Samurai perpetually plays second fiddle to everyone else on the roster for these very reasons. I'm not sure if he was intentionally made weak or just happened to get very unlucky during development, but the bottom line is that he has to climb 1,000 mountains in order to steal victory from the jaws of defeat. Before the Marvel vs. Capcom series adopted its iconic tag team format, it used to be a traditional one-on-one fighter, with Darkstalkers and Nita being the sole reason why Marvel Superheroes is part of the series at all. This is when Spider-Man, Iron Man, Magneto, Blackheart, etc. joined the roster, although their green scientist friend Bruce Banner unfortunately received the short end of the stick. A tier list I found on Super Combo Wiki claims that the Incredible Hulk is the weakest warrior in the game, but with how little documentation exists online regarding his weaknesses, I've had to hit the lab hard in order to test things out for myself. After spending decades analysing this green behemoth, I've come to the conclusion that he's more or less a prototype version of what he would become in later games, and not a horrible, unplayable, good-for-nothing bottom tier, or something like that. In terms of raw power, Hulk is a beast, as his normals and hit confirms that chain into Gamma Charge do wince-inducing damage. The downside is that, like the name would imply, Gamma Charge requires a charge motion. Because of this, Hulk's fastest advancing strike cannot be quickly performed, so he has to rely on his slow walk speed and pokes to gain ground. Speaking of pokes, our green friend swings with reckless abandon in such a way that sacrifices damage for range. In other words, his furthest reaching normals generally do less damage than the ones that are best used up close, with these normals being easily punished on block. Special moves suffer from these same flaws too, as their disadvantageous frame data makes them inherently risky. From a distance, Hulk can throw out a piece of the ground that deals massive damage on hit, but it can easily be avoided or blocked. I guess it has quick recovery, but that doesn't stop Hulk from being shut down by his contemporaries. Gamma Lift allows you to freely travel around the screen while holding the projectile, which is actually pretty cool, but you're not able to block here. Also, Hulk's walk speed is made even worse when in this stance, making movement even more of a struggle. Gamma Tornado is a damaging mid-range hit grab that swaps sides, but like with Gamma Charge, this move is minus a billion on whiff or block, and you can even duck under it. The final attack in Hulk's arsenal is Gamma Crush, his only super. It has best-in-class priority and will beat out enemies who attempt a counter-attack, but like with other moves, and say it with me now, the recovery is trash. Unique to Marvel superheroes is the Infinity Stone system, where performing quarter circle back and 3 punches with a gem equipped will activate unique abilities. Because of how it boosts his attack speed and lets him perform normal to normal cancels, Hulk's best friend is the Time Gem, but if the enemy grabs it first, he's out of luck. Overall, I actually don't think Hulk is that bad, he's just a character of extremes. It's a little weird seeing him throw projectiles or have a hit grab instead of a command grab, but Marvel superheroes' depiction of the character is a great look into how Capcom were designing the early versions of these iconic characters. Ever since I first played X-Men vs Street Fighter at 4 years old, Dhalsim was always one of my favourite characters. He's far too complicated for a smooth brain like myself to pilot with any sense of competency, but his unique visual design and screen-filling special moves made him a fan favourite. It's a shame that he kind of sucks though. According to high-level American player Strider Zero, who I contacted on Twitter, Dhalsim is the weakest character on the roster for one major reason. But before we cover that, let's jump into his less obvious weaknesses. Firstly, Dhalsim's most basic combos are as threatening as a light sneeze. Unlike many characters where a simple magic series does a decent amount of damage, Dhalsim's propensity to make enemies fall out of his combos early significantly impacts his fear factor. His advanced combos obviously hit harder, but these rely on specific spacing and corner proximity, making them less than ideal in stressful situations where you're not confident in your execution. Interestingly, this issue is mitigated when using throws to begin corner combos, but when he's mid-screen, routes like this are less likely to work. And that's assuming Dhalsim can get in, by the way, as mobility is another area where he struggles. His Marvel 2 air dash and flight ability aren't in X-Men vs Street Fighter, and when combined with sluggish walk speed, dashing and using drills are how you'll be approaching. If one of these drills connects, it can't be cancelled into a button, so you're gonna have to manually link into a grounded attack. On top of that, Dhalsim has less than average health, with even a short combo dealing meaningful damage to his malnourished body. It only gets worse, dear viewer, as his recovery animation leaves him open for insane punishment, and this is what I was talking about earlier. When you end a combo early against any other character in the game, they simply flip out and land on their feet with no issues. In fact, this is a common fighting game trend found all over the genre, but not for Dhalsim. For whatever reason, this flip out has been replaced by his teleport animation, turning him into a sitting duck. This means you can drop your combo on purpose to force the teleport and then punish accordingly. Because of this, every single character has Dhalsim-specific infinites, and if time is running low, there's nothing stopping you from timer scamming. If someone who knows what they're doing hits Dhalsim once, that's enough to demolish his entire health bar and send him flying back to Street Fighter. Even if you aren't an expert at this game, there are still easy ways to exploit this quirk, with my favourites being to loop Wolverine's Berserker Barrage and Magneto's Hypergravitation. The sky is the only limit for Dhalsim-specific resets, and you can find plenty of disgusting combo videos online showcasing just how far this can be pushed. If it wasn't obvious by now, selecting Dhalsim in competitive play maybe isn't the wisest decision one can make. Playing well enough with him to avoid being hit by the infinite reset glitch is one thing, but you still have to take his low health, damage, and mobility issues into consideration. Sorry Dhalsim, but look on the bright side, you were pretty good in Marvel too. Known for its removal of popular infinites and expansion of the series roster, Marvel Superheroes vs Street Fighter is a tricky one to research, as its lacking popularity doesn't lend itself to a tsunami's worth of accessible character discussions. Finding a basic, credible tier list is a true challenge, but after stumbling through the depths of old fighting game message boards, I came across a series of posts concerning fighter viability on the old Shoryuken forums. Aside from containing early 2000s internet arguments that would instantly get me demonetized, Sakura and Dan were frequently brought up as some of the worst characters in the game, but there's another fighter who received even more mentions, Shadow. For this reason, I'll be nominating him as the game's weakest combatant. If you aren't aware, Shadow is an evil version of Street Fighter's Charlie, one that's been infused with Bison's psycho powers. On a surface level, Shadow's move list is mostly identical to his orange-vested counterpart, although I believe the psycho powers result in greater special move damage. This sounds like he would be better than Charlie, and with how no one in the aforementioned Shoryuken forums explained why Shadow was bottom tier, I found it hard to believe that he was so lackluster in the beginning. And then I put more time in training mode, because when I did that, the cracks in Shadow's game plan started to become apparent. For starters, none of his throws lead to a true hard knockdown state, guaranteeing a tech roll that kills combo potential. His specials are locked behind charge motions, meaning you can never instantly use them on reaction. There are zero aerial mobility options in his toolkit. None of his normals seem to control space in ways that will give the faster characters trouble. Sweep into super seems like a simple high damage combo ender until you realize that sweep can be tech rolled, and I don't believe he has access to infinite combos. The biggest drawback of all, however, are his supers. Just by looking at them as a viewer, there doesn't seem to be anything wrong, right? They do decent damage, can cover aerial space, and their uses are immediately obvious, so what's the deal exactly? Well, eagle-eyed viewers will notice that when Shadow enters his super startup frames, his eye glistens in the wind. As this is considered to be part of his supers, you have to wait for the entire animation to finish before he attacks. By this point, the enemy has already broken free of hitstun and can block the super without any issues. Unlike Charlie, who can chain normals into supers in his sleep, Shadow's eye slows him down to a snail's pace, kind of ruining his combo game. Shadow Justice can confirm from a distance, but only on regular-sized characters, who can tech roll by the way, with his other supers outright failing to connect from all ranges. Cross Shadow Blitz at least has some pushback on block to make punishment less consistent, but the same can't be said for Shadow Break. Taking a holistic view at Shadow reveals that there's nothing special about him. His offensive techniques are mediocre at best, his defensive capabilities are lackluster, his movement is plain, and he has next to no comeback potential. In my opinion, Shadow is one of those characters that looks and sounds awesome, yet falls entirely short in the gameplay department, leading to him being completely underwhelming, at least in a competitive sense. If you're playing casually with friends and you aren't worrying too much about winning, Shadow can be really fun to use, as his off-kilter presentation style is unlike anything else in the game. Also, he has a raging demon, so I can't hate him too much. At this point in time, I'm sure you're intimately familiar with Marvel 1's secret characters, with one of these mysterious figures being on the chopping block. Although Orange Hulk and Lilith are considered to be very weak in comparison to the rest of the cast, there's one reason why they aren't scraping the bottom of the barrel, and her name is Roll. Roll's depiction in Marvel 1 is quite accurate to her source material when looking at aesthetics, but when you analyze her power levels, they leave much to be desired. Despite her being totally useless in high-level play, there are some solid characteristics that can be taken advantage of when playing casually, so thankfully it's not all doom and gloom. It should come as no surprise that Roll's tiny stature lends itself to falling out of combos, forcing opponents to manually readjust their routes to prevent them from ending prematurely. Crouching Heavy Kick is a slide that low-profiles certain projectiles, allowing Roll to make offensive use of her size, and if she finds her way in, her throw speed makes it hard to tech on reaction. Other than that though, it's kind of all downhill from here, with Roll's damage output being her most obvious flaw. Whether you're doing a basic Magic Series combo or a more advanced route, no opponent will break a sweat once caught by Roll's strings, as she has to perform so many of these in order to take a character out. Even if you connect with her Hyper Roll super, this is minus on hit, meaning you'll be punished for playing the game as intended. This is already pretty terrible, but when you notice that her health value is that of a diseased bit of roadkill, it makes taking risks in neutral to gaining ground ill-advised. Stubby normals are a common problem that many fighters in Marvel vs. Capcom run into, with Roll also suffering from this very issue. From what I can tell, her medium attacks can't chain into her launcher because of their pushback, and they aren't great in neutral either. Actually, none of her normals are, as they're easily outclassed by those of any other fighter, so she has to work extraordinarily hard to take control of a match. Zoning is a struggle too, as her fireballs are slow to start up and recover, Beat Plane doesn't do enough damage in comparison to its meter cost, and summoning robot friends for extra moves simply takes too much time to be truly useful. All of this means that Roll is a fighter with low health, low damage, weak zoning, weak rushdown, zero dominating mid-range tools, and an unsafe super. Now you might be wondering why Capcom decided to make Roll so weak, but I believe it's because they wanted a funny joke character who was believably underpowered. In the Mega Man universe, Roll is a housekeeping robot with a desire to heal people, not harm them, so it makes sense that her combat abilities are far behind her friends. In terms of gameplay, she's intentionally designed to be Marvel 1's joke character, as losing to her leaves you with no excuses. Roll doesn't have much going for her in terms of competitive viability, but she's still a fun character to pilot, especially when you bring Mega Man on screen for a canonical beatdown. Moving on to Marvel vs. Capcom 2 now, dude, there are so many low tiers in this game, don't even get me started. Some of you might expect me to talk about Servbot, as he shares an almost identical set of flaws to Marvel 1's Roll, but there's one saving grace that he brings to the table: his size. As a 5'11" warrior, many attacks cleanly travel over his shiny yellow head, but the same can't be said for Roll. Yep, she's the worst character in a second Marvel vs. Capcom game. Everything I just spoke about before in the previous section still applies in Marvel 2, but with how the game has a completely different meta and set of mechanics to Marvel 1, we'll analyze Roll's shortcomings through a new lens. As DHCs and Team Supers are some of the game's genre-defining features, its strongest fighters can make great use of long-range or otherwise effective supers to keep dealing damage, although Roll can do neither. From full screen, all three supers have far too much startup to reliably extend combos from most common supers, and when up close they hit like a soft pillow. No matter where or how you route into these supers, they'll never act as satisfying combo tools, with the same phenomenon applying to her assists. Projectile is very large, but does low damage and can easily be avoided. Variety is a small, diagonal flower bouquet that does even less damage, and Balance does the exact same thing. The only difference between these two involves Roll's alpha counter, which is also far from useful on the best of days. When combined with general issues like her low health, damage, short normals, etc., Roll has zero comeback potential, as even the other low tiers can demolish her without needing to put in any effort. The only traits she has going for her are a double jump and small body privilege, which aren't exactly Roll exclusive. Honestly, if you really want to play as a low tier Mega Man character, you're much better off with Surfbot. He's as durable as wet paper, but at least you can make use of a solid super. Plus, he stops to eat curry mid-battle, which takes major cojones. To be frank, there's not much else I can explain about Roll that hasn't already been said. If you can think of a potential character trait within Marvel vs. Capcom, chances are that her offerings to this trait are extremely weak, so much so that she is the worst fighter out of a 56 character roster. As Marvel 2 marked Roll's final appearance in the series, it's a shame she went out with a whimper and not a bang, but the silver lining is that she received major buffs for Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. As Marvel vs. Capcom 3 is somewhat of a blanket term used to describe two separate releases, my original plan was to find Vanilla's worst character first and then move on to Ultimate, but in my view, Darkstalker's Hsien-Ko is easily the worst fighter in both games. Unlike her respectable tenure as a mid-tier in Vampire Savior, Marvel 3's iteration of Hsien-Ko reduces her down to a bottom tier. With that said, how exactly did she fall from grace? Well, let's start with her strengths. Hsien-Ko can control the mid-range with disjointed pokes, she can set up a barrier to reflect projectiles, she can keep the enemy in block stun via Senpubu, she can loop supers for monstrous damage, her X-Factor damage and speed boosts are solid, and she can activate an install that gives her hyper armor. As a support character with hyper armor, Hsien-Ko actually isn't too bad, but it all comes crashing down when she enters the battlefield. For starters, her movement sucks, as although she does have an air dash and pseudo-teleport with her forward dash, these are both painfully slow. The first 15 frames of her forward dash keeps her stuck in place, so if you cancel into another move, she doesn't move at all, making wave/plink dashes impossible. Because of this, any character, even those with horrible movement options themselves, can easily outrun her. Damage output is a second avenue where Hsien-Ko struggles, as when you look past her admittedly stylish aerial routes, they don't hit very hard. Many of her useful normals strike multiple times, meaning they increase hitstun decay and damage scaling, so you often need to end a combo early with a super. Under the best of circumstances, her solo combos that use multiple bars of meter will do big damage, but the problem is that most of Marvel 3's roster can score this damage for far less meter. As mentioned before, Hsien-Ko can loop supers, but with how many resources this requires, it sometimes isn't worth it. I mean, you'll get the short-term satisfaction of getting the kill, but now you have to fight a new character with little to no resources for your team to capitalize on. During their incoming, Hsien-Ko can't commit to any super mind-boggling mix-ups or general block string pressure on her own, so it's not like how spending meter for the kill with Dante, for example, guarantees an incoming setup. If you fail to stick to the enemy like glue, Hsien-Ko will be forced to do battle from a distance, and this is a nightmare. Projectiles can be thrown at multiple angles, but these are randomly generated, making it unlikely that you'll throw the best item for your current situation. The final point I'd like to touch on relates back to her hyper armor, as it isn't very good when on point. When activated, you can just easily run away until it expires, and if she installs again, there's nothing stopping you from repeating the cycle. This leads to Hsien-Ko burning through meter that could be used for high damage combo enders, leading to her player having to make an important decision. Do you save meter for combo enders and sacrifice hyper armor, or do you sacrifice high damage combos and use hyper armor for neutral? Spoiler alert, none of these options are amazing. Though she sucks like a vacuum cleaner, I've always thought that Capcom did a fantastic job with Hsien-Ko's visual and audio design, as she looks stunning in motion. There is no chance that she keeps up with Zero, Morrigan, Virgil, Magneto, Dr. Doom, etc., but hey, on the bright side, she has a pretty cool windscreen. After reinstalling Marvel Infinite and once again being subjected to fetal alcohol syndrome Captain America, I realized that in all my years playing the game on and off, I never definitively understood who the worst character was. Because active tag allows characters to remain safe and extend combos whenever they want, many weaknesses can be mitigated with the push of a button. But after asking around and doing some independent research, I've settled on everyone's favorite steroid junkie, Chris Redfield. The very first thing I stumbled across was a Reddit thread where Infinite players discussed Chris's strengths and weaknesses, with the top comment listing an American prevention hotline for an act I'm not allowed to say on YouTube. Ouch. As Infinite maybe has the best balancing out of any game of the series, there are meaningful positive qualities within Chris's toolkit, with the most important being that he can supplement his partner from anywhere on the screen with active tag. Performing his grenade launcher super and then tagging is a free mix-up, and with how his combos are meter positive, this can happen very frequently. When in neutral, Chris can use a variety of firearms to control space, covering ranges that many characters like to occupy. The most impactful of which is his Magnum, dealing 1500 damage and allowing for full combos should it connect. What's more is that ground throws also lead to combos, ensuring Chris can begin routes from anywhere on the screen. This might all sound wonderful, but don't get too ahead of yourself, dude, you're still bottom tier. Anyway, remember those screen control tools I just spoke about? In Ultimate Marvel 3, they would ignore incoming attacks, keeping Chris safe if he took damage after throwing out a grenade or landmine. His Magnum would penetrate through enemy projectiles too, but not in Infinite. It's easier than ever for you to turn into a magician and make his damage disappear, with a universal push-block reflection negating most of his zoning opportunities. On the bright side, you can't reflect the Magnum, but as it only has 3 bullets, you can just wait for him to run out of ammo. At this point, he's forced to stop dead in his tracks and reload. I'm pretty sure the idea was to call on your partner to cover Chris's reload animation, but if they've been taken out, he has no choice but to thug it out solo. His other specials and normals are highly situational and don't serve much purpose in neutral, which is, you know, where he's best at, serving as one of the nails in his coffin. A relatively unknown weakness that I didn't catch at first is that Chris's hitboxes often don't connect against 2 enemies at once, ruining happy birthdays. With how severe damage scaling and guts is in Marvel Infinite, losing out on this opportunity is a real pain in the butt. Generic weaknesses like mediocre movement and lacking aerial options are present too, and all of these drawbacks combined leads to Chris feeling like a cheerleader for his partner rather than a fully realized character in his own right. It seems to me that Capcom intended Chris players to almost only use Resident Evil's poster boy to set up traps and deal some light zoning before tagging out. Even characters who aren't designed as zoners have far superior projectiles, and if that's all you care about, you might as well select them. Now that I think about it, Chris doesn't bring anything special to the table, really. I mean, I'm glad he returned from Marvel 3, but it made no sense for Capcom to cripple him with a Nerf hammer. It's a shame that all 7 of these fighters are ultra low tier, but given enough dedication, I believe that anyone can make them work. Well, maybe not roll. There's nothing quite like using the weak to destroy the strong, and if you fancy yourself a low tier hero, definitely check these characters out the next time you play Marvel vs. Capcom. They may leave you hanging in some crucial moments, but that doesn't make them any less meaningful than their mid and high tier companions. Before we wrap up, another big shout out goes to Super Combo Wiki for their fantastic learning materials. I couldn't have made this video without them, and even I, as a longtime Marvel player, learned a lot during my research. Okay, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you and your time, and I hope you had fun. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.